Maria if we could at least tweet that while peaceful protest is the right of every American, there's no place for lawlessness or violence. She replied with one word, no. I became the first senior staffer to resign that day. I couldn't be part of the insanity any longer. When I was press secretary, I got skewered for never holding a White House briefing. It's because, unlike my boss, I never wanted to stand at that podium and lie. Now here I am, behind a podium, advocating for a Democrat. And that's because I love my country more than my party. Kamala Harris tells the truth. She respects the American people, and she has my vote. Thank you.
We have been listening to a rather remarkable speech at the Democratic convention there as they're going out to some of the videos. We have heard from people who worked for Trump and then criticized him, so that part might have become familiar. But rarely do you have someone who stood, as Ms. Grisham just mentioned, on behalf of the president at the White House, turn around and oppose his next campaign. Michael Steele knows these stories intimately as a Republican who's also done the same, although you never worked for Trump, so I don't mean that comparison. But what does it mean, both that Donald Trump has recent former aides like this, A, and B, that the Harris campaign and the DNC now is giving them center stage?
You know what? I think people need to put it into context about what's remarkable, what you're going to see this evening, and what we saw last week with the elevation of, Republicans for Harris. 70,000 Republicans on a phone call on behalf of Kamala Harris. Is in the past, you would have a Republican, member of Congress who just is in a red district or a red state and decided, the easiest thing for political survival is to flip, and they'd wind up going to a Democratic convention. And we saw that the same with Democrats coming into Republicans. And it's usually one or two folks over a 2 or 3 cycle. What's profound about this is you're going to see a cavalcade of Republicans coming out and speaking about why party is less important than the value of our country, the value of our citizenship, the value of our freedom. And that's a very powerful message. I mean, Stephanie and others took a big risk to work in the administration. In the first place, people forget the front end of this, where there were a lot of folks in town saying, you really shouldn't do this. You shouldn't take this job. But for them, it was about service to the country. They get inside that bubble and they see just how god-awful it is, how amoral, how desensitizing it is. And they get out. And then what do they get out to? What do they come out to? They're ostracized. They have no home politically. And so when you have someone like Kamala Harris is offering up an opportunity to join us in a fight for the country, this is the response you're seeing. And I think it's very powerful. And from Governor Giles to Stephanie to others that we will see this evening, it's important for my fellow Republicans to know it's okay, baby. It's okay. It's okay. You can do this because the next day will be better. You'll still pay your bills the way you always have. You'll still have Thanksgiving dinner with the family. Your life will go on, but you will be freed of the burden of supporting someone you know doesn't stand or is aligned with your values.
Yeah, and that's not just Republicans.
It's not just
people who may have voted Trump once or even twice.
Thank
and the
you.
question is, do you need to do it a third time or not?
That's
this is
exactly right.
The Harris campaign using these big nights to show that. And in the Republican side, the negative space in their painting was, where's Mike Pence? Oh, he was physically in danger. Where's George W. Bush? I guess it's not his party anymore. That's the negative space. Here we're seeing the brushstrokes of saying, no, you can come into the Democratic side. So that's fascinating. We haven't taken many breaks. Michael Steele, Joy Reid, Alex Wagner's all with us. We're going to take a quick break. And on the other side, we've got some exciting labor talk at the DNC next.
Watch what avocado does to your inflammation.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Levitt here, and did you know that the most powerful foods to relieve pain and reduce inflammation come from right here in the supermarket. So let's go shopping. Eggs can absolutely be part of an anti-inflammatory diet, but the health of the chicken that laid that egg matters a lot. So inside of an egg, the white is where the protein is, and the yellow, the yolk, is where the fat is. And that fat makes all the difference. The diet and the lifestyle of the chicken matters.
The Biden-Harris administration passed the American Rescue Plan, including the Butch-Lewis Act, to save our pensions and secure our retirement. They got it done without one single Republican vote in Congress. They saved over 1 million pensions, including 33,000 from my state, Wisconsin, 52,000 from Pennsylvania, 61,000 from Michigan. As president, I know Kamala Harris will have our backs. She will fight for our retirement, Social Security, and Medicare. Beverly passed away in 2019, but I kept my promise, because a promise is a promise is a promise. Thank you.
I'm streaming this on your YouTube, man.
All right, we are listening. We just listened to retired Teamster Kenneth Stribling as we are covering the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago. Joining me now is former Senator Claire McCaskill, and we are just getting ready to have a very, very special guest next to her. But I want to start with you, Claire. You just said, if that's the Teamsters,
Yeah, I mean, I think that president, he spoke at the Republican National Convention, and all hell broke loose in his union.
Yeah.
The black members of Teamsters left the Teamsters union and endorsed Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
They are the only union out there that is still supporting, they're not supporting Trump, but they're not supporting Harris.
Right.
And for most union members in this country, that's really hard to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the fact that these guys all came on stage without their union formally endorsing Harris tells you a lot about some dissension in the Teamsters.
It's a very big deal, particularly given the very stark difference between the economic policies that both of these candidates are promoting. I want to bring in Stephanie Grisham, who we all just saw and heard on stage, former aide in the Trump White House, working with the First Lady, the then First Lady Melania Trump. I wrote down what you said, Stephanie, and I want to read it back to you because I tried to get my phone fast enough to record it because this is some truth telling. You said behind the scenes, Donald Trump mocks his supporters. He calls them basement dwellers. Wow.
Yeah.
Say more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just true, and I felt like, I spent 6 years with him, and I really did believe in him at the beginning, and I really wanted people to know what he's like behind the cameras, because it's all he cares about is when he's in front of the cameras. And so if I can reach any independents out there or Republicans out there to understand that I get it. I get what it was like to believe in him. I get it, but I just want people to know that this is who he really is behind the scenes.
And what was compelling? I mean, I've talked to people, Republicans who, like you, believed in Donald Trump, and one person was just honest with me and said they liked the fact that he was a celebrity, and they felt that Democrats always had the celebrities, and they liked that he was famous. And what was it that made him compelling to you initially?
So I joined the campaign 2 weeks after he came down that escalator, and it was because I just worked at one of his rallies as a favor to somebody, and the way the crowd reacted to him, and the way that he spoke so plainly, he didn't use just the political jargon that everybody used.
He was like a politician.
Yeah, he was like a breath of fresh air, which really makes me sad to say that right now. But at the time, and then I just kept going, and I kept seeing the people's reaction to him, and I thought, well, maybe if we can smooth out his kinks.
There were a lot of kinks. I mean, and you talked about your disillusionment. Obviously, January 6th was a big part of that.
Yes.
But for you, and because there's so many Republicans that that are here. I mean, I just spoke with the mayor of Mesa, Arizona. He's a whole Republican.
It's my home state.
Yeah. And people are being welcomed so warmly here. There's not any judgment here. This is like, come to the cookout, right? Come to the party. How does that feel for you?
I don't understand it, because for me the last 4 years since I've been out of office it's just been hate and hate and hate coming at me, but also just watching him as a citizen. And it's just, nothing's good without me. The country's terrible. Everything's bad, but only I can fix it. And so this is just, it's joyful. Of course, that's the word everyone's using, but it's really unifying. And I believe that the Democrats here are understanding that we've got to come together, and we're not going to agree on policies, period, probably.
Yeah.
But we've got to talk to each other like humans again.
Yeah. And Claire, look, I met a guy last night when we got back to the hotel who talked about the idea of this as a family reunion. And then we just heard Jamie Harrison use that same language. Because a family is full of people who think all sorts of different things, may feel different ways, but they all get along and love each other. The family reunion theme definitely feels like the vibe right now.
Yeah, because we all have somebody in our family that sometimes we want to strangle them, right? Because we disagree with them.
But we're not going to actually do it.
Right. But on the other hand, at least I'm so glad you feel what I think is sincere in the Democratic Party, and that is we can go from Bernie and AOC to Joe Manchin. We really can. And even though there are times we get really frustrated with Joe Manchin, but we can. And the idea that we are trying to reach out, I do not for the life of me understand why Donald Trump has never seen the need to reach out to people. I mean, he never really asked the Haley voters to support him. He never really asked the DeSantis voters to support him, and that's in his own party, much less asking Democrats who, to come to his side. What is that about his psyche that he is unwilling to ask people to join his movement?
Because he doesn't think he needs anybody. He wants to be an elected king. He wants to be, an autocratic government where everything he says goes and everyone falls in line, whether it's in Congress, in the DOJ, as we know, the military. He doesn't want to have people join him. He wants people to just do what he says.
Yeah.
And again, that was something I watched him evolve into, I have to say. I don't know in the beginning he even had that way of thinking, but I watched him evolve as he learned about the power he had. And I watched it just happen over time. And at the end, he became just a tyrant. And truly, it was just, don't question me. We're just going to do what I want to do. And,
Can you talk about the outreach that the Harris Walz team made to you? And kind of what was that process like? What brought you in the door?
Well, I had been talking to some people prior to Biden stepping down about the possibility of endorsing him. I knew that as somebody who had been around Trump for so long again, that I probably had a good voice and could speak out. And I wanted it to be impactful, though. So finally, when the Republicans for Harris came to me and they asked me if I would be involved, I jumped at the chance. And everybody I've worked with on the campaign has been fantastic and welcoming. And it's just such a breath of fresh air having worked in a campaign and in an administration that I worked in before. And it's truly been wonderful.
And for people who feel uncomfortable as you did with Donald Trump and the way that he behaves, and by the way, we've talked about this, we can tell that he has contempt for his supporters. Like, I think anyone watching can tell that he does not have a great deal of respect for his followers.
No.
But when somebody comes to that realization, what does that conversation look like? To say it's okay to, you don't have to vote for him. You could vote the other way.
It's hard. It's hard to admit you were wrong. It's hard to admit you were so wrong. And so I try to say that to people, like, look, I get it. I understand, but I'm telling you what he's like. And look, go behind that voting booth. It's a private place. And vote your conscience.
Right.
And I really believe a lot of people, especially Republican women, are going to vote for Kamala, but maybe not tell their husband.
You know what?
I really believe that.
And I think your courage, and make no mistake about this, everybody needs to understand that what you're doing is courageous.
Yeah.
You will get loads of hate from lots of places, then it will be very, very hard. So kudos to you and your bravery. But your bravery allows people that maybe aren't so brave to quietly, like you said, go in the voting booth and say, well, you know, if Stephanie Grisham, who is that close to him,
it's private back there.
I could do this in my own private little voting booth.
I really believe that's going to happen. I think she's got the silent vote this time. I really believe she'll have it.
And do you think that, you know, because to me, I feel like Dobbs changed so much that it fundamentally changed the equation for people who might have thought they had the luxury to stick with Trump before, especially women and any man who cares about women.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it was profound in that way, that Dobbs changed things?
Absolutely. And I tell you what, I live in Kansas now, in a very small town in Kansas, and Kansas overturned, you know, they voted to have women's choice be put back into the state constitution. And to see that in such a conservative state was really interesting. And I think that that was a big deal. I think absolutely you're right. Like, I think women across the country realize their very freedoms were going to be taken away. And I think the Harris campaign has been brilliant at bringing in people who talk about, you know, it's not like we're using abortion as birth control necessarily. I think that, you know, yesterday the speaker was absolutely important, and I think that it just shows how short-sighted and short-minded and misogynistic, frankly, Trump and Vance both are.
And not just with women. I mean, we saw, Claire, on that stage and on that big screen, a man from Alabama, and he said, I'm not a liberal, not even close. But he then made the case for voting for Harris and Walz. The tent is getting bigger.
The tent is getting bigger, and it may quietly get bigger, but it's also saying the quiet part out loud. We've had an awful lot of Republicans that are part of Republicans for Harris.
Yeah.
And I hope more join the party.
I do too.
The
by the way,
please join. Please, yes.
I want to show that we're seeing on the right side, we're seeing people dancing and grooving on the left side. On the right side of your screen, that is Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. They are in Milwaukee. They are preparing to do their rival to the Donald Trump Republican convention. They're going to do a lead troll. They're going to do a little bit of a troll that will be broadcast here. Right now, we're listening to Common's band that are rocking out here. But it is going to be very interesting when that all comes together. So there they are at the tarmac. They will soon be in the very same arena where Donald Trump did his convention. All right, we've got a big night of speeches to come from the Democratic National Convention right here in Chi-Town, Chicago, Illinois, including President Barack Obama, former First Lady Michelle Obama, and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff. The Doug is in the house. Rachel Maddow is next. Stay with us.
This is Ragic. It looks just like any common spreadsheets you'll see in Excel or a Google Sheet, but it is much more powerful. You can
Good evening. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to night 2 of our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. I'm Rachel Maddow here at MSNBC headquarters in New York. And we know you can watch tonight's proceedings at the DNC anywhere, but nowhere else can you watch with the great Lawrence O'Donnell and Jen Psaki and Stephanie Ruhle and Chris Hayes. I alone feel lucky to be here in their presence. We are also glad that you are here with us. It is going to be a very, very fun night. Holding down the fort for us from the convention in Chicago, the great and indefatigable Joy Reid and Alex Wagner. We're going to be with them throughout the evening. They've been working all day, but it's nowhere near over. Tonight is night 2 of the celebration of the Democrats' ticket and this Raise the Rafters party they have been having for themselves and their nominees. But because it is night 2 of the 4-night convention, that also means there is business to attend to. So we are awaiting, I would think within this half hour, we are waiting the start of the roll call of delegates. Now, technically, Democratic delegates already cast their votes and sealed the nomination for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz earlier this month. They did that in order to work around around a hinky ballot access question in Ohio that the party was sort of but not really worried about. It's basically just them being doubly, triply sure there wouldn't be any trouble with that Ohio ballot access question, so they completed the official nominating process ahead of the convention. Nevertheless, tonight, within this half an hour, they're going to act it all out for fun. And if past is prologue, it will be kind of fun. Chris Hayes is already talking about the calamari incident involving the Rhode Island delegation years ago. The less said about that, the better. But if you know, you know. The symbolic voting will start with the delegation from Delaware, which is a tribute to President Biden's home state. The voting will then go through all the states. It will end with the delegates from Tim Walz's home state of Minnesota. And then ultimately, the final state will be Kamala Harris's home state of California. After the voting is done, we will roll into another very big night of speeches from household name political leaders. Set to deliver remarks tonight is the Senate Democrats leader, Chuck Schumer, as well as the iconic progressive Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, also the charismatic governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who was instrumental in bringing the convention to Chicago. We're going to hear from the second gentleman tonight, Doug Emhoff. And then the main event, giving the last two speeches of the night, will be former First Lady Michelle Obama, who very rarely does stuff like this. And she will be followed by the man best known as her husband, President Barack Obama, who will give tonight's keynote address. Barack Obama will address the convention 20 years. No, that's why we played this tape a second ago. He will address tonight's convention 20 years after he spoke at the DNC in Boston in 2004, which Lawrence O'Donnell was waxing eloquent about last night. That, of course, that 2004 speech in Boston.
Vice President and our next President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
Wyoming, how do you cast your vote?
Mr. Secretary, delegates, my name's Joe Barbudo, and these folks around me, we are honored to be representing the great state of Wyoming. Both the first state and territory in this nation to recognize a woman's right to vote, and the state that 100 years ago elected Democrat Nellie Taylor Ross, our nation's first female governor. With that legacy in mind and heart, the Equality State cast all of our votes for the woman who will be the first woman president of the United States. Say it with me now.